As I said, 21 days of activism against racism is something that we are part and parcel of. This is happening in Brazil, though, but then uh, all over the world, people are getting involved in this particular exercise. It's very, very important, and you need to get on board as well. And on the day of the event, we would be bringing you live feed of the events as well. And I mean, you get to see people all over the world talking about this particular issue and how bad it is in Brazil. I remember when, the George Floyd incident came about, Black Lives Matter and what have you. And then, it was like, what's happening in Brazil? Let's get to find out what's happening in Brazil. It turns out that, whoa. I mean, the level of racism in Brazil is even more, serious. It's actually eaten it's more of like deep rooted into the system. And sometimes it's kind of like there's nothing happening in Brazil, but it is actually happening. So we are talking about that today. And of course, other days that we would be also looking at this particular issue of racism. So let's proceed now to our discussion zone.
The new Africa is fresh, creative, and energetic. And I love Africa Global Radio.
Okay, before we get to discussion, so let's talk about and just read this piece that I have right here. It says these days the myth of Brazil being a racial democracy where everyone is colorblind and no one is discriminated against because of the color of their skin finally seems to be crumbling because like you know what it was never happening but it is actually happening. Following the abolition of slavery in 1888, Brazilian authorities refused to implement any kind of public policy to integrate black people into society. Instead, over the course of the 20th century, they carefully constructed a narrative in which Brazil is cast as a rare haven where people of all races are able to live in harmony. As a result, despite black and mixed race Brazilians suffering the worst of police violence, having limited access to education, making up 64% of the unemployed, having limited representation in prominent decision making bodies, and being almost three times as likely to be victims of homicide, most of the Brazilian population remained convinced there is effectively no racism in their country. So, this is a matter of concern. I mean, if this is the case, why do we see people, uh, you know, going out in their numbers, protesting for the president to resign when COVID, started, and the one of those countries that actually had the more of like the at the point in time they were like second highest, across the world, but about third. They came third in terms of the number of fatalities, talking about the fact that the president is being discriminatory with respect to how they are handling issues of COVID 19. I mean, two health ministers resigned in Brazil because of the issues of COVID. They were not able to handle issues and what have you. And then the killing of George Floyd. Well, before that, COVID came right after the killing of George Floyd. And then Black Lives Matter protesting, some teenagers were killed and what have you in the hands of the police. It got people wondering what exactly is going on. But then let me begin with Hafiz right here. Hafiz,
Charlie,
how are you?
I did.
Were you actually surprised the first time you heard about the issue of racism in Brazil, like how deep rooted it is?
Not at all. Not at all. Because
Okay.
I mean, for a soccer head, no football. It's Americans that call it soccer.
Yeah.
Don't mind them.
Mm.
So for a football head like me, it's usually. I mean, when you talk about Brazil, you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking of the Samba boys
Yeah.
and everything football. But moving down to more serious issues like racism
Uh huh.
and everything,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, to be honest with you, that I've actually dug deeper into it and
Okay.
tried to understand what exactly
Mm.
is going on in that country anyway.
Mm.
But thanks to, I mean, the observance of what we call the 21 days of activism
Exactly.
against
Yeah.
racism,
Mm.
it's something that we decided to explore a little bit more further.
Uh huh.
And hopefully we'll be able to be in the position to provide more clarity
Mm.
to our listeners
Mm.
and our viewers alike anyway.
Right.
Yes, but speaking about what racism, 21 days of activism against racism,
Mm.
I mean, just looking at racism in itself is one subject we've covered extensively on this
Right.
platform,
Mm-hmm.
extensively in a myriad of ways, that is. And usually when we cover it, we are usually doing that through the lenses of the United States.
Exactly.
Everything. And today, I think we are delving into the realms of
Yeah.
Latin
Go and
America.
say, yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
Brazil to be specific.
Right.
And hopefully we'll be able to amplify what 21 Days of Activism Against Racism is all about,
True.
and provide more context. Now, where did this unfortunate marriage between Brazil and racism start?
Mm.
Now, if you look at Brazil, it was the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery.
Slavery.
Yes,
True.
in 1888.
Mm.
Now, when they abolished slavery, like you
Okay.
mentioned, I mean, you read it quite clearly.
Yeah.
There wasn't a clear-cut policy as to
Mhm.
how to integrate the blacks, or should
True.
I say, more appropriately, Afro-Brazilians.
Yeah.
There wasn't a clear-cut policy
Mm.
because in the United States you had the Jim Crow policies in the southern states
Yeah.
where it was very clear as to what exactly they were doing to them.
Okay.
In South Africa, there was apartheid, which was government-backed policy,
Mm.
and you could see the discriminatory acts against, the black folks. But
Okay.
in Brazil, it wasn't so clear-cut. Now they adopted a different policy
Okay.
of more what you'd say a racial whitening policy.
Mhm.
Now, when I say whitening, it's not about skin bleaching. It has to do with making the population more white
Okay.
than it is.
Right.
Because in Brazil, we are talking about a country that has 4 million Africans that were shipped.
Yeah.
Yes, because of that.
Yeah.
More than any
Any
other
other
country.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they had a huge.
They have
black
the
population.
largest population of
Exactly,
people of
so
African descent, actually.
It
Yeah.
was something they considered a problem, and they
Mm.
wanted to deal with it.
Mm.
And in London in 1911, there was a Universal Racist Congress that was what held.
Okay.
Now, the Brazilian representative by name João Batista Lacerda, now he spelled out what they could do
Okay.
to reverse the trend, as it were.
Right.
Now, he suggested that they should increase immigration when it comes to white Europeans, and
Okay.
then stop African immigration,
Mhm.
and that way they would have, caused the disappearance of the black population
Mm.
in 100 years' time.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So nothing says you are unwanted or you are expendable than this.
Mhm.
Now let's come back to recent times. Now, when you talk about racism in Brazil, a lot of the time they'll tell you it doesn't even exist.
Okay.
Yes. Now they'll tell you yes, they have their issues. They have issues of classism and everything, but
Mhm.
it has nothing to do with racism. They would argue
Okay.
because they usually would even point out to the fact that their population 54%. We are talking about some 54% of their population that is mixed.
Mhm.
So they'll tell you that it's not racist. But in trying to identify what exactly is going on there, I think in 1994, an anthropologist, a Chilean
Okay.
anthropologist
Yeah.
by name Alejandro Lipschutz,
Okay.
if I'm not
Mm.
wrong, he said, now he referred to what exactly the dynamics that was at play in Latin American societies, not just Brazil, but the Latin American society, and how the treatment was meted out to people that were considered of a lower class.
Okay.
And he coined the term because of it. He coined the term called pigmentocracy.
Okay.
Yes, and that was largely to try to identify some of these things. But the question then is, if racism is not a problem, what is? How do you then solve a problem, a situation that even the people don't consider a problem?
Yeah.
And that is where I think 21 Days of Activism
Yeah.
Against Racism comes in.
Comes in. Thank you very much, Hafiz, and that was a bit of a history right there. Just going back and forth and trying to get a clear picture of how this whole issue is all about. And yes, 21 Days of Activism Against Racism is very, very. It's actually an important, event that everyone needs to get on board to support our brothers and sisters. I mean, all over the world who are actually victims of this particular inhumane act. Let me start with let me go to Abby right about now, so we can talk about 21 days as well as Brazil.
I think this is not the first time we're talking about Brazil. We actually
No.
had a week when we looked at the whole racism thing, and we looked at Brazil on one of the days.
Yeah.
One thing, though, is the fact that you can't necessarily say Brazil is not a paradise for blacks.
Yeah.
Neither is it 100% hell.
Mm.
Brazil is caught up in the middle. They like to call themselves a racial democracy,
Yeah.
when clearly on the ground that is not the situation, because
Okay.
they don't Brazil, unlike the United States, that is widely put out there, doesn't come out front to say this is it and we're doing it against the blacks. But
Okay.
it actually is happening on the streets, in the homes, in the lanes, and they've not really put out a lot of things to try and stop it. They have put setting laws in place.
Yeah.
I know that way back over the past 2 decades, the whole protest and things that have arisen over there has thrown more light and let them move from that place of, oh, it's not like we're not doing, no, but we're doing. It's taking them from that position where they're not really acting and thrown light on it. So people are aware that something like this is actually happening in the country. And now it's got people to say, okay, let's do something about this whole racial thing. And they're trying to change some of, the ethno-racial identities and then bring about some social relationships that is going to bring advantages to the blacks.
Okay.
And Brazil is a place that I think we had the statistics. It's a place that you have a black person dying, about a certain number of them die almost every hour or so. It had the highest then. I'll get the figure.
Yeah,
I'll get the
I
figure.
remember we
Yes.
mentioned that. Yeah, yeah.
I'll get the figure. I had the highest number of black deaths that occur within an hour on a daily basis.
Not good. The show was Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. You can also share your thoughts with us, your opinions on our WhatsApp platform +233 2070 64680 or on Facebook Africa Global Radio. Yeah, Abby?
Yeah, one thing too they also did was when it comes to education, the public education, that is what the blacks have access to here in Brazil. You can't put quality over there.
Yeah.
They literally it's like draining them in the right places or
Yeah.
putting them down in the wrong places. So they don't give quality education when it comes to public education, public schooling.
Yeah.
I mean, most Brazilians, most of the blacks just have access to the public ones, and it's not the best. Now, if you look at the labor market
Yeah.
and income distribution, also, there's also the trend, the change over there.
Yeah.
They don't have an established Jim Crow laws like America did have.
Yeah.
But then they have things in place that are actually working against them. And with their formal sector, employment has decreased. I mean, for the blacks, the salary gap is like higher. You have
Yeah.
the Brazilians actually getting it higher.
So,
And then also
that's the
people
thing.
are getting...
Who are the Brazilians? That's the thing. Who are the
You can say they're
Brazilians?
You can say white Brazilians.
Yeah.
I
Who
mean,
are the
You
European
can call
Brazilians?
them
I think.
Afro-Brazilians.
Afro-Brazilians, because I mean everybody who is a citizen was born in Brazil is a Brazilian, isn't it? I mean, talk about education. I have a bit of data here. It says, before I come to you, Mommy, let me just quickly go over this. It says this is actually a research by National Research of Housing Samples done in 1999. It goes way back, but then it just gives a clear picture of how the thing kept on till date, right? It says it contains the most recent and reliable data. Now, 54% of more than 160 million Brazilians declared themselves white, so Afro-Brazilians, I would say, right? Hafiz, you said Afro-Brazilians.
Yeah, Afro.
5.4 declared themselves Negro, and then 39.9 call themselves mulatto, meaning dark skin. Now, from this population, illiteracy rates are 8.3% white, 21% Negro, and 19.6 mulatto. That is, blacks are 2.5 times more illiterate than whites. Now, when we come to earnings in terms of wages and salary, now the whites, the white Brazilians, let me put it that way, earn on average 5.25 times the minimum salary. The blacks earn 2.43 times the salary, with mulattoes 2.54 times the minimum salary at the end of every working month. Now, therefore, the average income of a white Brazilian person is more than double the average income of a black person. Almost 14.6% of blacks are household servants. Take a look at that. 14.6% of blacks in Brazil are household servants. Only 6.1 of them whites in Brazil work in this function. And among mulattoes are, 8.4%. Now let's go to the university. The main Brazilian university in terms of research, number of students, and the quality of education is the University of Sao Paulo. Now, the way of selecting the student is done through a rigorous college entrance exam, in which competition is extremely difficult. Now, the university, 79.5% of the students are white Brazilians versus 1% blacks. 1%, only 6% of the students are mulattoes, while 12.9% are Orientals. Now, the population of blacks and mulattoes in the state of Sao Paulo amounts to 33.1%, while the yellow population does not exceed 1.8%. Thus, blacks and mulattoes are underrepresented in the University of Sao Paulo by almost 5 times. Mommy,
Barry,
not a good representation at all.
not at all.
And I always have a problem with identifying this person. I don't even know who is a mulatto. I try. But I think I refuse to see it that way. I only want to see a human being.
I mean, you do
It's
not.
terrible.
You do not see color.
Others
right?
would see.
Others would, and a mulatto.
That's a terrible
I
thing to
think,
do.
Is a mixed race per se.
Yeah, that's what they call the half caste. Yeah, the half caste. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But to,
let's hear
to,
you.
to add to the stats you guys have given,
Right.
so around 56% of Brazilians identify as black, making them the largest population of African descent
In
outside
Brazil,
of Africa.
outside of Africa, right?
Yet,
Mm-hmm.
black people make up just 18% of Congress.
18%.
18%
That was
of
over
Congress.
100%.
And then 4.7% of executives in Brazil's 500 largest companies. It's like when you take Brazil's 500 largest companies, only 4.7% of the executives are blacks.
Imagine if you have 1% of blacks in the universities. So how many educated, qualified people would you get in these companies working? When
It's
most
just-
of them are household workers.
And then when you
It's
come
terrible.
to when you come to the rate of crime, 75% of black people are murder victims. And 75% of black people are also those killed by the police.
Sad.
And now, coming to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Uh-huh.
So, during the COVID-19 pandemic,
Right.
black Brazilians who already earn just 57% of white Brazilians do on average have died and lost their jobs at a higher rate.
Of course they would.
Police killings rose to 5,804 in 2019, almost 6 times more than comparative figures for the US.
Exactly. I think you mentioned one. I mean, one of you guys mentioned that particular figure on the time we were talking about these issues of racism and what have you after the killing of George Floyd.
So
and all.
you take all of these
It's a clear
stats
picture.
into consideration,
Yeah,
and
it's a
then
clear
it's like
picture.
every time we talk about racism, we are focusing on America,
On the
we are
US,
focusing
yeah.
on London. So
Yeah.
it's like we don't really know
no,
or get to
yeah.
hear
Where
about
the
what's
largest
going on in
concentration
Brazil,
of people of
but
African
that's
descent
where they have
are.
it the worst.
Yeah, very true. And that is shame on to anybody who is actually involved in this act.
Shame to
I
all
would
of
say.
Okay,
Hafiz.
let me come in, especially in the descriptions bit.
Mm.
Now, you read very interesting statistics about
Yeah.
who is black, and
Who is
especially with the
mulatto,
who is mulatto, and the
yellow, and
descriptions
what
bit.
have you.
But you see, I think we need to find a particular context for that conversation, because you see, when you go to an American society, for instance,
Right.
so long as one parent is black
Mm-hmm.
and you are light skinned, you are black.
You're black. You're different.
That's all it is. There's nothing like you are mulatto, you are who. You are,
Yeah.
someone like say Barack Obama.
Yeah.
can say
They
he's-
consider him
he's
as
black.
He's black. Yeah.
That's the American language. It's that simple.
Right.
Because of what they call the one drop rule.
Yeah.
Yes, once you have a drop of black blood in you, you are black.
You're black. Okay.
There's no confusion there.
But I think.
But
uh-huh.
if you come to the Brazilian society,
It's not so.
there's no definition in there.
Exactly. I think
So there's a lot of
disparity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of confusion in there somewhere. Because you see, in the Brazilian society, I talked about them trying to whiten their population.
True.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so the thing is, if you are light skinned or you're white,
Uh-huh.
and your parents could be blackety black or whatever.
Yeah.
Look, the thing is, you'll be given the white treatment as compared to your parents. Because in the eyes of the law, you are white. You see the confusion there.
very.
So-
very confusing.
So it's not as straightforward as maybe in the
Yeah.
American case where okay,
at least
you are black, you are
there's
white.
that clear picture. Yeah.
Yes,
You know where
but
you belong.
There's a lot of confusion in that system as to
Very-
who is black, who is
very
white,
confusing.
and the sort of treatment you get. But then, I mean, one way you can actually look at the indicators or see blatant racism
Right.
is through policing.
Okay.
Yes, and how the police work is handled.
How the operations.
Exactly,
You
how
know.
police operations is carried
Yeah.
out.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, we've talked about it in American and everything, and how the situation surrounding George
Yeah.
Floyd. We know how everything panned out.
Right.
Now, in Brazil, it's not so different.
Mm.
Now, if you watch the treatments the favelas or the slums
Okay.
are subjected to, it's not the same as what you call the asfaltos, the posh white rich neighborhoods of the Copacabana.
Rio de Janeiro
exactly.
cities and
Yeah.
what
Where
have you.
that are, because it's quite different in the way they operate, and there are even numbers to back it up. Because if you watch, what's his name, the president Jair Bolsonaro.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he's a tough.
That guy.
I mean,
that
he
guy,
has a
that
tough
guy,
stance on
that
crime.
guy. Yeah.
Yes, and he has consistently backed shoot to kill, shoot to kill operations, and all
operations.
that. So he's a well-known hardliner.
Yeah.
But then, because of this stance, we've seen how police operations haven't actually favored the favelas because, I mean, the slums or the favelas are predominantly dominated by the Afro-Brazilians, and so we see how the treatment there, goes. Now, if you watch the numbers, now police-related deaths in the first 6 months of 2019, according to this report, alone was 1,075. Now, get this: 80% of the victims were black.
80%.
Yes, of such a figure were black. Now, and the death toll for April 2020 was up 43% over 2019. So it doesn't.
It keeps increasing. I wonder what the figure will be. Well, I guess we'll get to know about that as we continue with this particular activism. Very important. I mean, is that bad? And considering the fact that some of our relatives in some parts of the world, in Ghana, Nigeria, most of these people also travel to Brazil.
Now, when I mentioned Jair Bolsonaro, there's an interesting story that
Right.
Something he narrated that
Really?
that came to mind that is
Uh-huh.
actually funny. Now, he's been touted as being, basically the Latin America version of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So he said some
He says
homophobic
the
stuff.
stuff,
He's done
yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
things. And so in one interview, I think he was asked about it, and he said, "No, he's not racist. It's not. I mean,
He's not colorblind.
And he gave an example of how when he was in the military,
Okay.
he saved a drowning black man.
So that justifies the fact that he's not racist. Is that it?
Exactly.
That's his justification. Right. Anyway, let me get the interesting information about that. Epi.
Yeah, so it happens that in every 23 minutes, a black person is killed in Brazil.
23 minutes.
Yes.
After every 23 minutes, you need to watch your back before things go sideways.
Yes.
Not pretty.
And like
Not
Hafiz
at all.
mentioned, most of it responsible for it are the police.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in one of the times, they actually didn't even want to admit it. They just wanted to leave it down. But in the year 2014, something happened and it kind of shook Brazil in a way, brought people out to see the truth. And this came with evidence. So on June 11, 2014, you actually had 2 policemen who picked up 3 black teenagers in Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
And the 3 hadn't committed any crime. I mean, they just had petty offenses, a history of petty offenses.
Okay.
Now, these 3 boys were taken, they drove them up to the wooded hills above the city. They shot one in the head and killed him. They shot one in the leg and back and left him for dead. And, I mean, lucky for the other one, he escaped.
Okay.
Now, this, nobody would have known. It sounds like a movie. And nobody would have known or believed this, so like, it's made up. But unfortunately for the police officers, they actually left the patrol car cameras on.
So it took everything.
So it took everything. And
Wow.
the videos actually surfaced on Brazil's global TV. That's when people see it. And when you actually watch what's happening, this actually happened, a day before World Cup started in the year 2014.
What?
Yes.
Oh,
and
dear.
their comments are simple. We had to kill all 3 of them.
Because?
And one is like, okay, 2 less. Now, if we do this every week, we can reduce the number and we can reach the goal.
Oh my God.
The goal was simple. Crime reduction. It was a target to reduce crime.
And by killing them?
And you see, that's where the issue is. It comes under a beautiful frame. We're trying to reduce the crime in the country. But then who are you targeting? Who are you targeting?
God. Yeah, that's where they're more dominant and all.
So if you're in Brazil, race is a matter of life and violent death. It's not just death. It's violent death.
When it's actually a football nation where the football team is actually filled with all of these, black Brazilians and everything. I mean, every superstar coming from Brazil is from the Ronaldos to the Romarios to the Neymars and what have you. And these guys are the ones, I mean, making the world of football.
And they
A
have
sad one.
laws. They have laws that are clearly against discrimination by race or color. They have the laws, but they're not working with them.
Yeah, and
Anyway.
I know another country
They
that comes
have
to
the
mind that has
laws.
beautiful laws and can implement.
I mean,
You
serious.
do? You do? You want to let the cat out of the bag?
No, please.
You want to put it there? Tell me after the show.
I mean, they have laws against
Interesting,
harassment.
interesting one right there. Well, let me come to mommy so we can just move on there.
Yeah, in as much as we've talked about all of the bad things happening in Brazil,
In Brazil,
right now, it's
yeah.
like right now,
Mm.
the young black Brazilians
Mm.
are standing up and are fighting
Right,
for their rights. They are
True.
forming new communities of black resistance
Mm.
to deal with a society still shaped at every level by the legacy of slavery.
Right.
And they are doing this by going back to a thing that they used to do. It's called a quilombo.
Okay.
And then the Quilombo was a name given to rural communities established by those who escaped slavery in the centuries before Brazil abolished it in 1888.
Right.
So now they're going back to that
Mm.
to form new communities to set up some sort of resistance towards racism. And I think it's good
It is.
because the youth
I
is
mean,
the future of the nation.
You never
And then
know.
we are seeing people of our skin color dying
killed
day
and all
in,
of
day
that.
out for just looking the way they look. I think it's a good thing they're uprising, and it's a good thing that this 21
dear.
days of activism
Oh yeah.
is bringing
Yeah.
light to
Yeah.
what is happening in Brazil.
I had a friend in my neighborhood. His brother's son. I just asked about him like a couple of days back. He was like, "Oh boy has gone to Brazil." I'm like, "Really?" And he proceeded by saying, "Oh, from Brazil he went to the U.S. and all
But
that."
even when,
Okay.
when she talks about
Yeah.
the Colombo, think of what we mentioned yesterday. They are usually just the descendants of slaves. So you talk
Right.
about the Osu,
The one in
I mentioned
Nigeria, yeah,
That's
they
what
are not
call the Osu.
included in anything at
No.
all.
So it's just the Latin American equivalent
Version of it.
Yes.
Too bad. But yeah, thank you very much, guys, for joining me. And of course, this is something that we are part and parcel of. We will continue to hammer on it as far as the issue of racism is at hand, and the exclusion, the segregation, the discrimination. I mean, out there it is seen as okay, nothing is happening. But deep inside, systemic, it's happening. And this is something that we need to let go. You don't need to identify people by their color. You need to see a human being as a human being. That's all. It's just one race, like we keep on saying. It's the one race which we call the human race. So let's uphold that, and collectively let's see the total elimination of racism. Let's do that. I believe we can, and all you need to do is follow this 21 days of activism against racism. You go on on Facebook, you find a page there, support it and follow it, and of course get a bit by bit updates of how the whole exercise would be. Like I said, the live feed would be right here on the Africa Daily Show.